Everything alive is going to die. That is the one rule nothing escapes. Every animal, every plant, every person you have ever known is on a one-way road, from young to old to gone. Time only moves in one direction, and aging only goes one way. Except for one animal. There is a creature in the ocean, smaller than your fingernail, that found a loophole. When it gets old, or badly hurt, or starving, it does not lie down and die like the rest of us. It does something that should be impossible. It ages backward. It melts down into a younger version of itself, resets its entire body to an earlier stage of life, and starts over. And then it can do it again, and again, in theory, with no end. We call it the Immortal Jellyfish. And yes, that name is real, and the science behind it is real. But I want to be honest with you from the start, because the truth here is stranger and more careful than the headline. Immortal does not mean what you probably think it means. This animal has not beaten death. It has beaten something else, something arguably even harder. So let me show you what the immortal jellyfish really is and what it can and cannot actually do. First, meet the animal, because it is almost laughably unimpressive to look at. The immortal jellyfish is tiny, only about 4.5 millimeters across when fully grown, smaller than your little fingernail. It is transparent, with a clear bell ringed by as many as 90 thin tentacles, and a bright red stomach you can see right through its glassy body. It was first described by scientists in the Mediterranean Sea back in the 1800s, and today it has spread across the oceans of the world, very likely hitching rides in the ballast water that ships pump in and out as they travel. You could scoop one up in a glass of seawater and never realize you were holding the only animal known to cheat aging. To understand the trick, you first have to understand how a jellyfish normally lives, because it is not as simple as you might think. A jellyfish has two completely different body forms in its life. It begins as a tiny larva, which settles onto a rock or the seafloor, and grows into something called a polyp. A polyp looks nothing like a jellyfish. It is a small stalk, fixed in place, a bit like a tiny sea anemone or a piece of coral. The polyp stays put and grows, and then, when conditions are right, it buds off into the swimming form we all recognize, the medusa. The medusa is the classic jellyfish, the pulsing bell with trailing tentacles. It drifts, it feeds, it grows up, and eventually it reproduces. And then, like everything else, the adult medusa ages and dies. That is the normal path. Larva, polyp, medusa, reproduction, death. A one-way street, just like ours. Here's where the immortal jellyfish breaks the rules. When one of these adult jellyfish runs into serious trouble, it does not have to follow that road to the end. Instead of dying, it can throw the whole process into reverse. The adult medusa can transform back into a polyp, the earlier, younger stage it already passed through long ago. It is as if a butterfly, facing death, could melt back into a caterpillar, build a new chrysalis, and emerge young all over again. That is the closest thing in our world to what this jellyfish does in the sea. So how on earth does a body do that? The answer is a process with a long name, transdifferentiation, and it is one of the most remarkable abilities in all of biology. Most of the cells in your body are locked into a single job. A skin cell stays a skin cell. A muscle cell stays a muscle cell. They cannot swap roles. The immortal jellyfish's cells can. When the medusa begins to reverse, its specialized cells actually change their identity, transforming from one type into another. The whole jellyfish shrinks and collapses, its bell and tentacles pulling in, until it becomes a small blob of tissue that settles onto a surface. From that blob, a new polyp grows. And that polyp can then bud off brand new, young medusae, genetically identical to the original. One aging adult becomes a fresh new generation. The clock does not just stop. It runs backward and then forward again. It does not always take the exact same route either. Sometimes the dying medusa forms that little blob, a kind of cyst, before becoming a polyp. Other times, it seems to slide more directly into the polyp stage, but the end result is the same. The single swimming adult is gone, replaced by the attached, stalk-like form, which then sprouts new jellyfish by simple budding, the way a plant sends up fresh shoots. So one stressed, dying adult can become a polyp that, over time, releases many young medusae into the water. The reversal does not just save one life. It can turn one ending into several new beginnings. This was first documented by scientists in the 1990s, and at the time, it sounded almost too strange to be true. An animal that could undo its own development, reverse from adult to child and start again, with no clear limit to how many times. The discovery itself almost happened by accident. In the late 1980s, a young researcher studying these jellyfish kept his specimens in a tank and expected them, eventually, to age and die like any others. Instead, when he checked, the adult medusae were gone, and in their place were polyps, the younger stage they should have left behind forever. At first it looked like a mistake or some contamination of the tank, but it was not. The jellyfish had gone backward. Scientists then watched it happen again under careful conditions and confirmed the impossible. These animals were reversing their own life cycle on purpose. It took the work of several researchers through the 1990s to convince the wider world that this was actually real. Now, here is where I have to keep my promise and be honest with you, because this is the part most people get wrong. Subscribe if you want the real, careful version of stories like this, not the exaggerated one, because every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice, and we try to tell you what is actually true. The immortal jellyfish is not unkillable, not even close. The word immortal is doing something very specific here. It means this animal can escape aging, the slow breakdown that eventually kills the rest of us. It does not mean it cannot die at all. In the real ocean, these jellyfish are eaten by fish, by sea turtles, and by other predators all the time. They get sick, they can starve, they are tiny, soft, and fragile, near the bottom of the food chain. In fact, in the wild, the overwhelming majority of them die the ordinary way, as medusae, eaten or killed, long before they ever get the chance to reverse. So the immortal jellyfish is not a creature that lives forever. It is a creature that, in principle, never has to die of old age. Those are two very different things. It has not defeated death, it has defeated aging. And honestly, when you sit with that, it is somehow even more impressive. Because aging is the one part of death that science has never been able to stop. What actually triggers the reversal? Stress. This is not something the jellyfish does for fun or on a schedule. It is an emergency escape hatch. When the animal is starving, or physically injured, or hit with a sudden change in temperature or the saltiness of the water, or simply worn down by old age, that crisis can flip the switch. Faced with conditions that would kill a normal jellyfish, this one essentially chooses to start over rather than die. It is survival, taken to an extreme no other animal has reached. I should also be clear about something the headlines love to ignore. The immortal jellyfish is not the only animal with any reversal ability, and it is absolutely not a fountain of youth for human beings. A few of its relatives can pull off similar tricks to a lesser degree. And resetting the life cycle of a tiny jellyfish made of a few thousand simple cells is a world away from rejuvenating a human body made of trillions of complex ones. There is no pill here, no treatment, no secret to eternal youth waiting to be bottled. Anyone who tells you this jellyfish is the key to human immortality is selling something. The real value of this animal is not a miracle cure. It is a clue. And it is a genuinely exciting clue. In 2022, researchers in Spain did something clever. They sequenced the entire genome of the immortal jellyfish and compared it to a close cousin that cannot perform this reversal. They were looking for what is different in the DNA of an animal that can reset its age, and they found intriguing things. The immortal jellyfish appears to carry extra copies and special versions of genes tied to repairing DNA, to maintaining the protective caps on the ends of its chromosomes, and to keeping its stem cells young and ready. These are exactly the systems that, in us, break down as we age. Let me explain one of those, because it matters. The ends of your chromosomes are capped by protective tips, a bit like the little plastic ends on a shoelace. Every time one of your cells divides, those caps get slightly shorter. Wear them down too far, and the cell can no longer divide safely, and it ages out. That shortening is one of the clocks of aging ticking inside you right now. The immortal jellyfish appears to be unusually good at maintaining those caps, keeping its cellular clock from winding down the way ours does. It is as if it found a way to keep resetting the very timers that, in us, only ever count in one direction: down. Now, I will be fair, because good science demands it. Other researchers have raised questions about parts of that study, including whether the cousin they compared it to truly cannot rejuvenate. So this is a frontier, not a finished story. But the direction is thrilling. By studying how this little animal keeps its cells young, scientists hope to understand aging itself a little better. You might be wondering how many times one of these jellyfish can actually do this. Is it truly endless? The honest answer is that we do not know. In the lab, researchers have watched individuals reverse and regrow more than once, which is astonishing on its own. But whether a single line could repeat the trick forever, with no limit at all, has never been proven. Forever is a very long time to test in an aquarium. And remember, almost none of this has ever been seen in the open ocean. The reversal has mostly been watched in tanks, under close observation. In the wild, the process is so fast and the animals so small that catching it in the act is nearly impossible. So we know this can happen. We are still learning how often it really does. There is also something almost eerie about how this jellyfish has spread. Because it can reset and survive hard conditions, and because it is so small, it has quietly traveled the entire globe. Ships take in seawater for balance and pump it out again in distant ports, and tiny jellyfish go along for the ride. Scientists have described it as a silent, worldwide invasion. The animal that refuses to age has, without anyone planning it, slowly colonized the oceans of the world. It helps to put this in perspective. Plenty of animals live a very long time. There are sharks in the cold deep that may live for centuries. There are clams that have counted more than 400 years. There are tortoises that outlive the people who first found them. But every one of those creatures is still aging, slowly, the whole way through. They are simply running a longer clock. The immortal jellyfish is different in kind, not just in length. It is not aging slowly. It is refusing to finish aging at all, by returning to the start. A long life and an escape from age are not the same thing, and this jellyfish is the only animal we know of that truly manages the second one. So let us step back and think about what this actually means, because this is the part that stays with me. We tend to assume that aging is just a law of nature, as fixed as gravity, that everything must wear out and wind down, because that is simply how living things work. The immortal jellyfish quietly proves that is not a law at all. Aging can be escaped. At least one animal does it, every day, in the sea. The reason most life ages and dies may not be because it is impossible to avoid, but because, for most creatures, there was never a strong enough reason to evolve a way around it. This tiny jellyfish stumbled onto the exception, and it has been living that exception for longer than we can easily picture. But notice what its kind of immortality really costs. To escape death by old age, the jellyfish has to give up being itself. When it reverses, the adult is gone. It dissolves into a blob, becomes a polyp, and buds off new individuals. There is no single jellyfish swimming around the ocean for 1,000 years, remembering its long life. The line continues, but the individual, in any way we would recognize, does not. So even nature's one answer to aging comes with a strange catch. You can live on, but only by becoming something else, and starting again with nothing. There's a quiet kind of grief in that, if you let yourself feel it. We picture immortality as ourselves, going on and on, keeping our memories, our names, who we are. That is not what this jellyfish gets. It does not remember its past lives. It carries nothing forward but its raw biology. The reset is total. So even the one animal that escaped aging never got the thing we actually long for, which is not just more time, but more time as ourselves. Nature offered a deal, and the deal was always the same. You can continue, but you cannot stay you. So let us go back to that speck of jelly in a glass of seawater. You know now what it really is. Not an unkillable monster, and not the secret to human immortality. Something subtler and, to me, far more profound. An animal that, when faced with the end, can reverse its own development, transform its cells from one kind into another, collapse into a younger form, and begin its life over. A creature that cannot beat predators, or disease, or hunger, but has quietly beaten the one enemy we fear most and understand least. The clock of old age. It still dies all the time. It simply does not have to. That is the real lesson of the immortal jellyfish. The rule we treat as absolute, that aging always wins, is not absolute after all. There is a loophole. It is small, it is strange, and it belongs to a transparent blob the size of your fingernail. We spent thousands of years dreaming of a way to undo old age, writing myths and legends about it. And all the while, in the shallow seas, a creature too small to notice was simply doing it. So here's my question for you, and I think about it more than I expected to. If the universe truly had a law that everything must age and die, this jellyfish should not exist. So what does it mean that it does? Is aging a rule of life, or just the most common choice life happened to make? If this changed the way you think about getting older, subscribe. Every week we go into worlds almost no one looks at twice, and the next time you hear someone say that nothing can escape time, remember the immortal jellyfish, drifting somewhere in a dark ocean right now, quietly proving that the one rule we all live by has at least one exception.